So, hi everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Tracy Johnson. I'm a project manager with Oregon State Parks, and I'm specifically the project manager for the Smith Rock Go Bond project. Some of you were involved, probably many of you were involved with the master plan that we completed last year, and Jen and Matt and I were all involved with that process as well. So tonight we wanted to hold a public information center to give you an update on the progress on the project since the time when we completed the master plan last year. So, Jenna, why don't you go to the next slide? So, the team that's here with you tonight is, as I said, myself, Matt Davey, who's the park manager out at Smith Rock. I'm sure many of you know his face, and Jenna Marmon, who's our planning and design lead. She's our fearless Zoom moderator. Our agenda, we wanted to give you a background of where we were and what we had planned during the master plan phase, what we've been working on in the schematic design, advancing some of the projects from the master plan, look at schedule and next steps for the project, and then we'll be happy to take questions from you all. This is set up as a webinar, and so your options for communication are to either raise your hand or enter a question in the Q&A. The chat is disabled because we set it up as a webinar. We're doing our best, but this is the first time we've done this without technical support. So, or fingers crossed, things are going as planned. Next slide.
Just real quick, I wanted to make sure everyone can hear Tracy okay. Could you raise your hand if you are having problems hearing Tracy? Marsha. Okay, yeah, they're having some difficulties hearing you, Trace. So maybe hold the mic up there and yeah.
Is this better? Better?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. I will try to speak loudly and succinctly. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So this is an image from the master plan that we adopted in 2023. So that was a pretty extended master plan process. At that time, we identified 5 primary development areas on the rim along Crooked River Drive. And we identified specific goals that were associated with the master plan, including providing opportunities for people of all ages, improving trail connections along the rim, improving the user experience at the park, providing additional restrooms, and consolidating some of the recreation use to preserve wildlife habitat. So as we've moved forward into the Go Bond project, so the Go Bond was a funding source that was identified by the legislature in 2021, and Smith Rock was one of the project areas that was identified. But we needed to update our master plan before we were able to proceed with the design phase for those projects. So 2 projects are currently in the development phase. Those are the overflow parking lot and the welcome center area. I've highlighted those in green on this so that you can see where they are. So they're roughly areas B and D. And we're currently in the design phase. We may not be able to fund everything that we had planned. 2 other items that are in the development phase currently are 2 trail connections that are shown as green dashed lines on this figure. A trail that connects from North Point, from A to C along the rim, and then a second trail segment that we're exploring the potential from the Welcome Center down into the canyon. I'll talk about all of this more as we proceed. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So, and additionally, here's a little bit more detail on the Welcome Center area. So this is what we proposed at the time of the master plan. We had identified an approximate location for the building and some changes to the parking lot, both to reconfigure it and to expand it to provide more parking. And next slide. And then we had also, again, this is a concept that we had developed during the master plan to formalize the overflow parking lot. Currently, it's an unpaved natural surface field that we can use seasonally. And I think both we and the county would like to pave that so that it's not dusty and it's more regularly available all year round. So those were the concepts in the master plan. So since the master plan was formally adopted in September of 2023, and then we engaged a consultant team to move into the design phase. And at that time, we started moving into what we call schematic design. So we were taking these preliminary concepts and advancing them. So Jenny, you want to go to the next slide, please? So this is the current working design for the Welcome Center area. This was this was something that we received in September from our consultant team, and you can see this is similar to what we had in the master plan, but it's showing some advancement in the design thinking and some refinements. So in this version, we have a pull-off area at the entrance currently. That's where Circle 1 is, and we've added a second area at Circle 2, which will be a new drop-off area, and we'll have a paved entrance area that leads towards the building. The building, you can see there are two sections on the left side, which will be the interpretive and public-facing portion of the building, and then we have kind of a breezeway, which will have a trellis and shade structure. And then on the right side, there's a second building that will be an additional restroom. And then we also are proposing some trail improvements in the vicinity around the Welcome Center. We want to have an accessible loop that can be used by all different types of users that goes around this area so that people have a paved path segment that connects around the Welcome Center. And then we're adding an overlook down on the rim, which is what you can see at approximately the Circle 12. And then we have trail connections that will then connect into the trail network that exists in the park in either direction. You can kind of see there's a stub trail over to the left. That's kind of where we are thinking of the jumping off point for a potential new trail into the canyon. We're still working on the feasibility of that, whether or not that's something that we can do. Jen, you want to go into the next slide? So here are a few more views. I guess I forgot I put the slide, so I already talked about a lot of this, but this is a little bit closer zoomed in view of the building layout. Again, this is very similar to what we had in the master plan. We did a lot of advanced work in the master plan, really figuring out what we wanted to include in the building. And we've been able to work from that. A couple of additional elements that I didn't mention previously. The area at Circle 9 is stairs that step down from the building to that overlook, which is actually at a lower level. We have grade change through this area naturally, and so we're working with that to kind of set the building into the landscape and then allow the building to be above viewing areas that are a little bit below it. And area 10 is a deck. So that deck is currently, it's an extension of the plaza that connects between the two buildings. And so it's at the building elevation and looks out over the top of the overlook that's down below in the area that's labeled as 12. Okay, next slide. This is a section elevation that's showing some of that topography change that I mentioned. So work that we've had done since the master plan, we've had archaeology surveys, we've had wetland delineation because we do have some wetlands in the park south of the parking lot associated with this building. We've had topographic survey, and of course we've been advancing the design. So from the topographic survey, we found that we have about 8 to 10 feet of grade change from the driveway to the rim overlook that you can see on the right in this screenshot. So this view is looking roughly west through the building, and you can see the parking lot beyond it. So you can kind of see how the grade change, we're working with that grade change, kind of trying to nestle the building into the landscape so it's not very dominant, and also working with it to allow us to have views from the building and then have the grade change drop to the overlook below so that people can see out from the building over the tops of people and also from the rim with a closer up view. Next slide. So these are a few renderings and perspectives that the consultant team has put together. They have a 3D model of the design. And so this is early days, but this is some concepts of what we're thinking the building will approximately look like. So this is a view of the approach from the parking lot towards the south side of the building. And again, you can see we have the interpretive and ranger administration spaces are on the left side. We have a breezeway shade structure that's in the center. And then on the right, we have a new restroom building. Next slide.
We have a question around the view of the Zoom screen. And Rita, I believe there are some options in how you can see us versus the screen that I'm sharing. Because I'm sharing my screen, I might have a hard time describing to you how to do that, but maybe Tracy or Matt, you could help. There's the box with the 3 dots up on the upper right, if I remember correctly, so that Rita can see a different view.
Yeah, so at the top of the screen, there is a little, so what I see is I see the presentation screen, and then at the top I see 3 boxes, which is our 3 faces. On the right hand, and that's in a black bar at the top of the screen. On the right edge of that black bar is a little button that says view, and it has a box with 3 boxes above it. If you click on that, it gives you a couple of choices for ways you could view. So mine is set on standard. There's also side-by-side speaker or side-by-side gallery, but I think probably during the presentation, the easiest is probably the standard view, if that's helpful.
Rita, was that helpful? Hopefully so. All right, we'll keep going. And I can always re-show some of these slides at the end.
And I believe you said that this is being recorded, so it will be posted. So I believe the view that you are seeing, Jen, is the version that's being recorded.
Yep. Hopefully none of us.
Okay. So I have just a few more views that are the 3D renderings from the consultant team. So these are not necessarily exactly what it's going to look like, but this is the working concept right now. So this is a view looking sort of through the main building space, and you can see we have a wall of windows that's on the park side of the building, so that people come in and they really, they see through the building and they can see that landscape beyond. Obviously, this is very early in the design process, and so the layout of the interior will have interpretive space. We will have a desk with rangers or volunteers to greet people and orient them to the park, provide information about trails and amenities. We also will have a small area that will be for some offices for volunteers and potentially 1 or more new ranger staff over time. And we'll have some space that can be used for meetings as well. And so this is going to be a large main room, and you can see there's a door on the left-hand side that passes into a smaller additional public space that also looks out over the view of the park. And then the administrative offices would be sort of at the back of the building towards the parking lot. Next slide. This is a view from the deck that's between the main building and the restroom building, looking out over the overlook toward the park. Next slide. And this is a view from the lower area looking up the stairs towards those 2 buildings. So this is a reversed view. The restroom is on the left in this view, and the main building is on the right. And that deck that we were just looking through is kind of on that right side. You can see there are 3 people standing on the deck. Okay.
Good.
And so now we're going to move into talking about a few of the other design elements that we're working on currently. So the overflow parking lot is another piece that we would like to build if we can. This is the preliminary concept that was developed at the schematic design phase. There are a couple of things. So at the time that they did this, the consultant was concerned that there was going to be a wetland setback associated with the irrigation pond on this property. And so the parking lot is showing a little bit constrained, a little bit smaller than we had planned in the master plan. We're still waiting for final decision from the Department of State Lands and the Army Corps of Engineers. We aren't expecting that they're going to consider the irrigation pond to be wet, and therefore we aren't expecting that we have setbacks. So this will probably be revised into something closer to what was shown in the master plan, which is really 2 full rows of parking. Another important point about this is that this currently is probably not a funded project. We are advancing the design at this time, but we will likely be putting it on hold after the next design phase and until we can identify more money, because even though we have, I'll talk about budget towards the end, but even though we have a good budget for the projects on the table, there's always things that are unfunded, and this is one of the things that we probably aren't going to be able to pay for with this phase of work. Next slide. 2 other elements that we're working on design for right now are the Rimrock Trail extension. So as many of you I'm sure are aware, currently we don't really have a trail that connects from the main park and entrance and chute trail out to North Point, and we've long had a plan or a goal to have a trail connection. Currently people walk along the street if they are connecting from one to the other, and so this would be adding a trail that's along the rim and not in the street so that people have a better user experience and also a safer user experience. This would be probably 6 to 8 foot trail. 8 feet is the current goal. It would be natural surface, but fairly flat and smooth and therefore accessible. And this would be helping to create, one of the things we heard in the master plan was a desire for more loop trail opportunities. And so this would be an opportunity to where people could, if they wanted to, hike down into the canyon, hike along the Homestead Trail, hike back out at North Point, and look back without having to walk on the road. So that's one of the, and also having more accessible trail spaces within the park is a goal. And so this would be one that would be, it's very steep to get into the canyon, but trails along the rim are an opportunity to have something that's more accessible and more usable by more people. Next slide. This is an example. So these 2 sketches, the last one and this one, were part of our LWCF grant application package. And this is showing again one of the concepts from the master plan of potentially adding a trail into the canyon from the area near the Welcome Center. Some of you may have seen Matt and I and a bunch of people out in the field last week walking around looking at this trail. We're still working on feasibility of where the trail would enter the canyon and how we would traverse down the canyon and where we would connect. It's a pretty aspirational goal, but if there's, it's something that we would really, currently we have 3 trails that go into the canyon. 2 of them have stairs on them, and one of them is very, very steep, 25 to 30% in some sections. And so the goal of this would be not to have what would be an ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act accessible trail, but to have a trail that's barrier-free and had low, flatter slopes, making it a little bit easier to navigate so that it could be usable by more people. Plus having a trail that's in the proximity of this Welcome Center, which we do expect to be a focus of visitation and users, would be beneficial because then people can go from this area into the canyon without having to hike along the rim and go down the chute, which is very steep. So this is something that we're looking at. It's pretty constrained, and we're hoping that we can make it happen, but we're still working on the details of that. And this would be a 6-foot trail, barrier-free, natural surface, or possibly paved. Next slide. So this is our schedule currently. We are still in progress on many things to support the design phase. We are hoping to have septic analysis and geotechnical subsurface analysis out in the park in the next month or so to help support the design phase. And we'll be submitting a land use application for the Welcome Center, the 2 trails, and the overflow parking lot current target for that is just mid-December. That's a pretty extended review process that goes through Deschutes County. Well, we're currently just about to start. So the prior design phase was schematic development, schematic design, which is what I was just showing you the images from. The consultant team will be moving into design development and construction design over the next 9 months. And then we're planning to go to bidding and contracting next fall, and then construction in late 2025 through probably third to fourth quarter of 2026. The construction schedule still is in flux. Related to all of that, we have a lot of permitting that we need to do. In addition to the land use application, we'll have development permits with Deschutes County. We also are coordinating with SHPO and National Park Service related to cultural resources, and doing tribal consultation. We are waiting for concurrence from the Army Corps of Engineers and DSL on our delineation, but we aren't currently expecting we'll have any wetland impacts associated with this project. And we are working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and ODF&W on endangered species and eagles within the park, eagles and raptors in the park, so that we can make sure that we are following the appropriate protocols and not and planning for, you know, the construction activity that is likely to occur during nesting season. Nesting season for eagles is January 1st to about August 15th. So, and most of our work will be pretty far from the eagle nest, but the golden eagles in particular are sensitive. So we're working with the agencies to make sure we're planning accordingly for that. And budget, I mentioned budget just briefly. It's been in the news lately. We were the recipients of an LWCF grant, which is a land and water conservation grant that's funded through the National Park Service. That's helping to improve our budget situation for this project. In addition to the LWCF grant that we received, we also have identified GO bond funding for this project, which I mentioned at the beginning. And then we also have some of our state works general capital improvement funding, which is funded by the lottery. And so all of those funding sources have been identified to help support these projects. And I think the next slide is just this is our contact information. Again, I'm the project manager. My contact information is here if anyone has any questions. We also have Matt Davey, Jenna Marmon, and then we have a project website that I'm having updated. I submit updates monthly to help keep everyone in the loop as far as what the status of the project is. And then in addition to that website, we'll be periodically issuing press releases to keep folks informed of progress. And that concludes our presentation. And now we're open for questions and answers.
Thanks, Tracy. Just real quick for folks, you don't need to frantically write down that website. You can also just put in a little Google box, Smith Rock Go Bond Project, and you will find that website. And I did want to say that we'll be posting this presentation along with the recording of this presentation on that site. So you can look closer at your leisure at the PDF of that presentation that Tracy just shared. So we do have a couple questions, and I wanted, before we answered those, to give Matt an opportunity to share anything that he might have thought of while we were talking through the project, and then we'll dive into the presentation or the questions and answers. Sorry, my Monday.
No, I didn't have anything else. I think Tracy covered everything really well, but I mean, this project is exciting because it's just going to be offering a lot more opportunity for accessibility at Smith Rock, which we really lack due to the steep nature of the canyon and the trails that access this. So it's really going to help, I think, give new opportunities for people that show up at the park that aren't prepared for the challenging nature of Smith Rock and like Misery Ridge. So this will help improve visitors' experience by giving a central orientation station, the Welcome Center, to get information about the park, and then options for some easier, accessible opportunities to see the canyon, see the park, learn about the history of the park and the nature of climbing without venturing into the canyon or up Misery Ridge if you were not prepared to do that.
Excellent. So let's just go ahead and run down the questions in order here. So Marcia asks, is the Rimrock Trail extension funded? And when we answer these, I'm actually going to go back to the overview map, just so we're all talking about the same things.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
So
Marcia, I
Rimrock
presume you're
Trail-
talking about the A to C Rimrock Trail extension.
yes. So currently, so budget is difficult because we've been in such a volatile construction climate the last few years. And so we were regularly seeing our budgets exceeded because costs were, even with planning for escalation and planning for design a couple years down the road and having contingencies on our projects, we're seeing a lot of projects come in well over budget. So we're early in the design phase. Currently, we are planning to build the Welcome Center and the Rim Trail extension at a minimum. And then the new Canyon Trail would be the third priority if funding and feasibility can be maintained. But it's pretty early in the design phase. And so it is possible that if we continue to face tough budget situations, that additional reductions could happen. So there's no absolute at this time, but our goal is to build as much as we can and to really, disperse the improvements to improve visitor experience in a number of areas of the park. And then I can see the next question.
Yeah, and I answered George's in a typewritten form, but I just wanted to point out on this map. So George, we don't have any current projects that include bridges across the river, but the master plan calls for 2 new bridges across the river in red here on this map. So one on the far north end and then one here on the south end, but reiterating, those are not currently funded projects. So it will be a little bit before we see anything actually on the ground or water, as it were. So the next question, Tracy, is around who the design consultant team is and how they were selected, and then the overall project budget.
Yeah, okay. So the design team we're working with is, we decided to continue working with the design team that we worked with in the master plan. So that team is led by Greenworks, which is a landscape architecture firm based in Portland and Bend. And then they have a very very diverse team to meet the needs of the project. They have an architect, which is Waterleaf. We have a civil engineer, KPFF, that are they have one big team that encompasses all of the roles that we need on the project. They have the wetland delineation team. They have mechanical, electrical, and plumbing team members. We have a green energy analysis team member. They do modeling. That's one thing I didn't mention, but because this is a new state building and our budget, going to your second question, our working budget for the 2 trail segments, our available budget currently is $7.5 million. And that is hopefully going to be enough to cover the building, the parking lot and utility improvements, the Rim Trail extension, and we hope also the new Canyon Trail. But because of the cost of the building, once the building is over $5 million, that triggers green energy requirements. And as a state building, it also has green energy requirements. So there's some extensive modeling and analysis that needs to be done. So our team members, the design team includes all of the components.
I think perhaps, Tracy, we've heard this question a couple times, and it might be worth adding to the GoBond page, the consultant team.
Oh, okay. That's
So,
a good idea.
So Matt, I'm going to let you take the next one. Is there any future plan for trail improvement from the existing overflow parking to the lower gorge climbing area?
That would not be part of this project. So access to the lower gorge, any changes to the lower gorge would be separate from this project. And given the nature of the lower gorge, we're not looking to make any improvements to that trail. It's really a climber access trail, and we want to keep it that way rather than giving general visitors access into the lower gorge. So plan is to keep that undisturbed.
Great, thanks. And Al wants to know if there will be changes to the traffic flow on Wilcox and Crooked River. And Al, we're gonna actually modify those roads to make 4 lanes by your front door. Just kidding, of course. As far as I know, there are no changes. Tracy, Matt, chime in if I'm wrong, but yeah, no, there are no changes to the traffic flow proposed on Wilcox or Crooked River Drive.
The only minor change would be at the overflow parking lot. If or when we proceed with building it, we're reviewing the option of adding a second driveway, whether to have 1 driveway or 2 driveways that enter into that. So the design that I showed had, I believe, a second driveway. So the master plan showed a single driveway. The schematic design had a second driveway. We've been discussing the merits of constricting the access versus, it's a little bit of there are some design considerations and some traffic flow management considerations for how we would proceed. But that's the only area that potentially change.
And I would like to follow
And it
up
would
on
be
that
pretty
too. I'll follow up on some of the maps or the pictures that you saw of the visitor center from the overhead view. You couldn't see the head-in parking along Crooked River Drive. And so the plan right now is not to disturb or eliminate any of that head-in parking on Crooked River Drive. We're going to leave that. Future projects will potentially move that head-in parking off of Crooked River Drive into its own separate lot, but that's not funded as part of this project either. So we're not looking to lose any parking through this project. There will be parking constraints during construction. We don't have that exactly identified yet, what that's going to look like, but there will be some impacts to parking during the year of construction. But we will be keeping all of that head-in parking along Crooked River Drive. And then anything that would be out on Wilcox or the entrance of Crooked River Drive into the park, those are all county roads, and that would be any changes would be through Deschutes County.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks for flagging the construction traffic. That will most likely have some impacts, but we will try to minimize the impacts to the neighbors for sure as we work through the construction project. Michelle asks about Pollinator Island.
So this is slide 2, or actually this is slide 3. Slide 2 is, so that's the cover, slide 2. Slide 3 is the master plan. So I'm not sure.
Is there one in here? Island.
So I can talk about, so just to be clear, the first 3 slides that we talked about, this and the 2 that immediately follow, were concepts in the master plan phase. And then we've moved into the design phase just for a couple of isolated areas. There will be native landscaping associated with the Welcome Center. And pollinator habitat could be part of that, particularly because as we're coordinating with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we're expecting the monarch butterfly will be listed potentially since December, and that the park potentially has monarch butterfly habitat within it. And so we have to at least consider that we could be having impacts that we would need to plan and mitigate for. So generally speaking, the landscaping, because this is a pretty natural park, we will not be doing, our goal will really not be doing a lot of formal landscaping, but we will have native and drought tolerant plants around the building, and then transitioning to the native bunch grass habitat and other habitat types that we have in the park. And then managing for weeds in our disturbance areas and trying to just reestablish and stabilize the soil after construction. So hopefully that kind of gets at what Michelle was asking.
And Matt, how about you take the proposed trail network where it's definitely fading in and out, Tracy, though.
Okay.
That was
Yeah.
good. The okay was great.
Yeah,
So will the proposed trail network, are all the trails proposed to be mixed uses, so pedestrians, people with pets, ADA, wheelchairs, mountain bikes, e-bikes, etc. Great question, Robert.
Yeah, we won't be making a lot of changes to the use of the trails right now by eliminating. So we will keep it mixed use to the extent that we can. The Rimrock Trail extension out to North Point will be widened and mixed use. So wheelchair. The idea is to make it, if not fully ADA accessible, ABA accessible. So the least amount of barriers as possible. For that Rimrock Trail extension. The new trail from the visitor center down into the canyon, if we are able to design that one, would probably be limited to pedestrian strollers. It would likely still be overgrade for ADA wheelchairs. That could be a challenging one for a wheelchair with grades potentially looking upwards of 10%. To make that grade into the canyon. And the mountain bike accessibility would still, that would probably not be a mountain bike trail into the canyon. That would still be the current canyon access trail from the near the chute down into the canyon. But yeah, mixed use is to the extent possible. And we're not looking at making any limitations to any of the other existing trails at this time.
Thanks, Matt. And the architecture firm again is Greenworks and Waterleaf, correct?
Yes, yes.
Excellent. And then I will copy and paste the website into the answer to Rita's question.
Can they see the Q&As?
Into the Q&A. Yeah, you can, you should be
Okay.
able to paste, but I need to stop sharing my screen, so I'll do that in a minute. And then we have a comment about native pollinator islands do not incorporate water, are too hot. So make sure that we take care of what we build. Yes, good points, Michelle. Thank you. This park is already extremely heavily used, and these new improvements will, in all probability, bring even higher visitor numbers to the park. What plans are there to mitigate the higher maintenance and damage disturbance coming from that heavier use?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, we've seen this park continue to grow in popularity and visitation. We actually saw our highest visitation year was 2021, and we've dipped those numbers a little bit for 2022 and 2023. So a little bit of a reprieve these last couple of years, which is nice. But yeah, we would see continued growth as people want to see this new welcome center. And the idea is not necessarily to continue to accommodate a higher number of visitors. So we're not going to be adding substantially more parking with this one. It's really about changing some of the visitor use patterns. And so that the key with the welcome center is to give people an option to be able to learn about the park, get to view the park, and choose an experience that may not have the same impact if they would show up and not have any information or knowledge about what to do at the park. So it's really about changing the patterns and consolidating some of that use to the upper rim trail. So the idea is to give to really expand the opportunities for hiking along the rim trail to the people that may not be prepared or be ready for a full hike down into the canyon, which is what happens to a lot of our visitors when they show up at the park unprepared anyway, as they go into the canyon. And so that's where we see that higher damage to the park resource issues pop up is from people heading into the canyon that really probably would have not even gone there anyway if they had other opportunities to experience the park through a welcome center and through a better rim trail option. And then one of the things we look forward to at this with the welcome center too is more restrooms. So we're adding 4 restrooms that will be accessible from the outside of the visitor center, and then 2, potentially 3 more inside the visitor center too. So that'll help take some of the load off of our current existing restrooms, as well as the compost toilets down in the canyon. So hopefully this would actually alleviate some of the resource damage by giving people other opportunities that don't involve Misery Ridge and the River Trail, Wolf Tree Trail. So we might actually see some less use down in the canyon because of this. That's the goal.
Thanks, Matt. And I just wanted to check to make sure that folks can see when I am answering some of these questions, they are going into the answered. And so I stuck that link to the GoBond website into those answered questions. Please let me know if you cannot see that for some reason or access that. And some of these other questions I've answered in that same fashion. So we're not ignoring you, we're answering those questions. But let me know if the answers don't meet your needs, please. And I will reshare my screen now.
So I will go ahead and field Marcia's question about parking spot gain. So during the master plan, I just want to explain a little bit of background. Let me hold my mic up so it's clearer. So during the master plan, one of our concepts was to repurpose the central island in the main parking lot. So right now, you may notice we have quite a wide island, grassy island area in the center of the parking lot. And so we had a concept in the master plan to convert that to parking, which would have allowed us to expand our parking in this area pretty substantially without increasing the parking lot footprint very much. But as we've gotten into the design phase, and specifically our septic needs, the interesting thing about our existing island is that it houses a drain field for one of our septic systems. And so because the park has such thin soil, and because a large portion of the field south of this parking lot was formerly flood irrigated and therefore isn't able to be, it's not really wet, but it's not able to be used for septic drain field in the near term, we've had to kind of move away from this concept of reusing the parking lot, the center island of the parking lot. So the current plan is to maintain the island as is and just to extend the parking lot a little bit towards the southwest to gain a little bit of additional surface area and a few additional parking spaces. And so the concept that we're currently working on adds 26 spaces to this parking lot. So it'll go from 92 to about 118. And that's the primary amount of increased parking that's associated with this project. If or when the overflow parking lot gets fully developed, we will actually see a reduction in parking at that location. That isn't part of the funded projects, so it's a little bit of a separate conversation, but currently we estimate that in its current format, it can accommodate about 125 vehicles. And with the additional formalization of it, as we have to comply with spatial standards for driveways and the different things that you need if we're going to create a more permanent parking lot, we actually will see a little bit of a reduction. We'll lose about 17 spaces, and it'll be more in the vicinity of 108 or 110. So we potentially would be gaining 26 at this parking lot and losing about 15 at the overflow parking lot. So close to a wash if both of these parking lots get built as the design is proceeding.
And Tracy, I was multitasking. Did you talk about, is there short-term parking still a plan at the Welcome Center?
So this is kind of a management question, and I don't think we know the answer to this yet. So some of the things that we will be incorporating in the parking lot at the Welcome Center, we will be at least adding one to two additional ADA parking spaces. We are hoping to add a few additional RV parking or large vehicle parking spaces. And we will either be adding a couple of EV charging stations or at least running, planning for the future addition of EV charging stations. We're a little far out yet to know from a management perspective if we would also include short-term parking as a part of this. Even EV charging is a little bit difficult because we would have class 2 chargers, which are the slower chargers, and so they don't really, on a day use park like this, it's hard to have an EV charging station and have people park and charge and occupy a space for a long period of time while they're hiking for hours and hours. So those are things that we're still trying to understand the feasibility of in this location.
Matt, did
There will
you? Perfect.
Yeah, there will also be, as you can kind of see as you come up to the visitor center, there will be shuttle and bus drop off too. So that's something that our local transit may incorporate into their route when this is built out too. So that could potentially be an option for people to visit the park without driving in, especially on those busy periods. And the short-term parking is something that we could look at and easy to implement or to take it out if it's not effective or if it's being abused and it would be difficult to enforce. So it's something we can look at if we need to. As well as like a timed reservation system, but that was not very popular during the master plan comment period. So at this time, we're not really considering that. We'll get through these projects and make adjustments as needed.
Thanks, Matt. And this is a project management question for you, Tracy. Has the team engaged a general contractor for preliminary budgeting efforts or constructability review?
So we have not done that at this time. We do have a cost estimation consultant as part of the design team, and they will be preparing, they function almost as a separate entity, third party, where they get the design documents at each deliverable phase and develop a construction cost estimate based on what they see in the plans and what they think it will cost to build it, similar to how a contractor would bid it. So that's the current process that we have in place. Or OPRD does not use, we don't currently have a method to use something like a CMGC, which is a way of getting a contractor bidding or contractor budgeting in advance. It's something that some agencies like Portland Parks are able to use, but we don't have a mechanism to use that. Procurement and contracting type, so that's not currently available to us, but we are using a lot of different tools for cost estimation to try and make sure we have a accurate cost estimate. It's just as important for the cost estimate to be accurate. We don't want it to be too low, and we also don't want it to be too high and have think we can't afford stuff, cut things from the project. So we're trying to keep to fine tune our cost estimate to have the best possible idea of what it's going to take to do our work. And Mary, I see your question about the total parking spaces. I just answered this. For this main parking lot, we're looking at about 26 additional parking spaces. So increasing from 92 currently to about 118. Those are still preliminary numbers, but that's what we're looking at in the current design for this phase of work. And that looks like all the questions.
It looks like all the questions. So does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask? We have about 9 minutes left in the scheduled program, but we're happy to answer any questions or end early. everybody got what they needed out of the typed answers.
You could put up our contact info again, and if people have any other questions that come to them afterwards, they can follow up with one of us.
Thanks, Daniel and Robert and Jackie and Marcia. All right, let me.
I hope this is helpful. We really, the LWCF grant announcement surprised us. I mean, we knew it was coming, but it still surprised us. So we wanted to make sure we got out and shared the news so that people weren't wondering. So.
All right. There's our contact information and the website. And yeah, seeing nothing other than a bunch of cheerleading for us, which is great. Thank you. Thanks for the kudos, everyone. Thanks, Tracy and Matt, for all of your work on this. And it looks like we can end the webinar. So thanks everyone for joining us. Make sure to tune into that website for the recording. Share it with your friends and family if you'd like to. And further information, we'll go ahead and PDF this presentation, like we said, so that folks can look closer at all the diagrams and the great visuals we had. Yeah, and we appreciate everybody's time and great questions, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you, everyone.